that your record, that I want to make sure that your statements are a matter of record, so anybody else joining our group can watch this. We'll keep it confidential, but anybody who is in part of our group and in trust will be able to have access to this recording. Is that okay with you, Janna?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, wonderful. And we just had some more people come on here. Let me see. Yeah, so Lynn Decker's come on board, and he has this microphone. Lynn, how are you doing?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can.
Hey, Lynn,
Fantastic.
Janna's on. It says you have no video. Are you on your phone or a computer, or what's up?
Yeah, I'm on my phone. I can switch to video. I was just multitasking. If you can bear with me here for a moment.
I got you, and that's fine. When you're clear, it might be good for you to introduce yourself a little bit to Janna so that she has an idea who she's talking to. When you're clear.
You bet. One moment here.
All right, good. And Linda, have you had a chance to talk to Janna yet? I know we've seen a couple of emails go past, but I know that you're looking forward to meeting with Janna in May, which is coming up here.
Yes.
Maybe we should talk about
and
that.
I pray your husband is doing much better by then.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So you're in Medford, Oregon, right, Janna?
I'm 5 to 6 hours south drive of Portland.
Okay.
And I'm kind of in the same situation, Linda, maybe not exactly the same, but sounds like your husband is struggling, and mine is as well. He fell off a roof recently.
I was talking about your husband.
Okay. I'm like, okay, yeah. So yeah, we'll see how he is. I don't know that I'll be able to travel at that point. It'd be lovely to be able to at least meet you halfway, but I just can't commit to that right now.
No, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, she's going to be in Seattle and driving up, I think. So that it may be fairly easy to do.
Okay.
Good. So, Lynn, are you there?
I am.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Is that?
Yeah, you bet. I apologize. I was just trying to get this video to turn on, but it's playing with me. There we go. I'm live.
Cool. There you are. So you want to talk to Janna and just tell her what you're doing, and so she has a perspective.
Hi, Janna.
Hi, Lynn.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. So I've been in terms of who I am and my background. So I have been a medicine person for about 20 years and have been involved in a variety of ways. I've been a business owner and a nutritional supplement formulator, and involved in many aspects of both we'll say the commercial as well as the spiritual side of plant medicines. And I consider all plant medicines an equal part in that world, especially where all of our medications come through that field. I've just learned how to be able to work with all different types of plant medicines, and I have a fondness and respect for entheogenics and for, of course, the Native American Church, and working with Linda. I've known Linda now for about 15 years and love her and being able to benefit from those learnings. And it's become a big part of an important part of my life. I have a background also on the cultivation side of things, and have worked with different types of plant medicines, understand a lot of the legalities and challenges in that space. One of the things that I think that I can probably bring to this conversation is on the regulatory side of things. And, some of the conversations that Linda and I and others have had in terms of how to be able to navigate this space, especially as an organization internally, and we'll call it self-regulation of those plant medicines, and how to be able to control and manage that process. I do quite a bit also in logistics and supply chain technologies. And part of that includes blockchain. And for those that don't understand how that applies, is that blockchain gives us the ability in supply chain of even things like this to be able to track and control all of the different aspects of, from seed to final consumer, of being able to self-regulate and control and track and essentially have a data record of every single thing that's moving through that entire system and process in a very clean way that is beneficial. So that's kind of where I'm at today. I've been spending a lot of my most recent days in the last 6 months ramping up an internal project in terms of we'll call it just business surplus and stuff that we're providing in terms of for the local community and being able to provide some business there. But that's kind of a side project. But I definitely do have an interest in being able to see how we can contribute to the challenges that are present in a more modern approach to how we're managing medicine within the community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cool,
Lynn.
thank you. And Sean, do you want to introduce yourself to Janna over here? She's our guest interviewee, and she'll be spending most of the time introducing herself. But if you want to, Sean, mention.
Can't hear you, Steve, or I can't hear you.
Well, I think you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just a brief one. Thank you.
All right. Sorry, I'm in the middle of a lot of stuff today, so I was late, and I'm gonna not be able to stay long, but I can stay for a while. I'm Sean McCausland. I have been involved with Oklahoma Native American Church from the beginning and probably 10 years before the beginning. Wrote the Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct for that. It's been modified a little bit, but the basis of it is pretty much the same as it was. Did a lot of other foundational work as far as setting it up and trying to protect the members, protect the organization, protect James and Linda. One of the foundational things that I believe with this new NAC, you guys are already addressing, which is the name of it, because we can't, in my mind, just call it the NAC because it's going to offend every Native tribe out there. So, you know, that's an important thing for us to be discussing. There's a lot of other stuff that we need to kind of zero in on and figure out too, but that's one of the primary things that I think in the beginning that we need to address is the name. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm just here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. The other guys should be joining us. I don't know where they are, Janna, but that's their problem, and you have a limited amount of time. So it's going to be recorded. Life is good.
Can you guys hear Steve? Because I can't hear him.
Can you hear me, Janna?
Yeah, he's in his car, so you might have to turn it up for him.
It's as loud as.
Well,
Yeah,
and yeah, okay. And so,
maybe
so
in
Janna, why
50s.
don't you go ahead and take it from here? As long as Linda can hear you, life is good.
Can you hear me okay, Linda?
Yeah, I can hear everyone, and Steve comes in and out.
Yeah, it could be because he's mobile. That could be why. So I was introduced to Steve recently through a mutual friend that works in the cannabis industry. And so my background is that I am a nurse, just recently retired nurse. I'm also a special needs mom. My 21-year-old daughter has autism. I've also suffered a lot of chronic illness and chronic pain issues. And, you know, as life happens in 2012, I became very disenchanted with mainstream medicine for my own health, which at the time I was suffering pretty severely from a lot of different immune imbalances and other system imbalances. And, you know, it was cumulative. So it was a lot of me ignoring my red flags. But I got to a point where my doctor had labeled me totally and completely disabled. My diagnoses included things like lupus, chronic Lyme disease, other chronic infections, immune deficiency, and autoimmune both at the same time. My body was very confused. And I, you know, I have a history of, you know, I grew up between San Francisco and Humboldt County in California, so I was very familiar with cannabis as a recreational tool. I actually credit it for replacing alcohol for me, which I think in retrospect was a very positive thing, but I had not used in probably 15 years when I began to look at it to alleviate my chronic pain issues as an alternative to opioid pain medications. And, you know, as a nurse, I knew that was not an option I wanted to pursue. I had worked with a lot of opioid addicted patients, and quality of life was so dismal, and, you know, a lot of terrible physical effects, including, of course, risk of death. And the statistics today say that the opioid epidemic is killing patients about 18 minutes of every day right now. So, you know, it was just this desperation to find another answer to try to get more functional and deal with my chronic pain issues, which, you know, I've since received further clarity on what causes those. And it's actually a genetic collagen disruption called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I literally have randomly dislocating joints. So it can be very painful at times. And I'm thankfully, my crash was in 2012 of my health, and I have not had to resort to opioid pain medications at all during that time. And I'm actually off Advil and Tylenol as well, which were pretty hard on my health. So it really can be an answer as a harm reduction tool. I know there's a lot of misconceptions about cannabis, and the way that you know, my process in this cannabis industry was very organic, going from a patient kind of being awakened to its benefits, not only for pain, but it eventually went on to seroconvert my autoimmune. So I'm now negative for lupus, which is kind of unheard of. You know, lupus is one of those conditions where they expect it to degenerate and continually to get worse until death, and they just try to manage symptoms. I'm off all pharmaceuticals, just doing supplements and cannabis at this point. But as a patient, I went from patient to grower, began working with patients, began educating patients. The gardening piece itself, and you may resonate with this, Lynn, was so therapeutic. You know, it was my physical therapy. It was my mental therapy. To this day, I need my garden therapy, or I'm just, you know, not all together. So that was a really big aspect for me. And then working with patients, and then my daughter has benefited greatly from cannabis as well when she entered a puberty crisis at age 13, 14. Once again, objectively as a nurse, weighed the risk versus benefits of the known benefits, the known risk factors, the known side effects, and came to the conclusion that cannabis was the safest and potentially most beneficial intervention for her behaviors. And cannabis actually spared her out of home placement, because at the time she was self-injuring. She was beating up everybody that she could get her hands on. She completely destroyed my house. We had holes in every walls, holes through doors. I mean, very, very traumatic period. So I credit it for that as well. I went on to be a consultant, actually working with patients and helping them understand cannabis as a medical intervention, understand what the science supports. And there is, you know, at this point, there's more than 35,000 reputable research studies on cannabis and its potential benefits. So there's this misconception that there's no research supporting its use, and it's quite the opposite. And these are NIH, you know, very reputable studies. It's not like High Times magazine articles like a lot of people think. So that was thousands of patients that I worked with between 2015 and 2019. In 2019, I suffered stigma by my Oregon State Board of Nursing, who actually shut down my business. All three of my nurses that I had trained to help different types of patients, you know, cancer, mental health, chronic pain, neurodevelopmental, like autism, even neurodegenerative, like Alzheimer's. I mean, dementia, we were helping so many patients, and they decided that nurses were not allowed to teach cannabis patients any longer. So at that point, I pivoted and I began educating medical professionals about cannabis. And I have accredited content through Cannabis Nurses Network, of which I'm a founding member since 2016. And that just kind of naturally led to me being chosen to teach a college course on the topic of cannabinoid sciences. So I'm working for John Patrick University, which is a college out of Indiana, North Bend, Indiana. And I'm working for their Masters of Integrative Medicine degree program, teaching these future medical practitioners about CBD and cannabis formulations. My course is SCI 306. It is a full semester long. It is DOE approved curricula. And I wrote it myself with some help from my mentor. So it's really been quite a journey, and really what has guided me through this journey has just been following patients' needs and really understanding firsthand and being so passionate about the potential benefit of cannabis, while at the same time experiencing the stigma myself. I'm also a legislative advocate. I've started a nonprofit 501c3 Autism Safe Haven, which is focused on improving cannabis accessibility to autism patients that are undergoing, care in care homes or other medical facilities. There's so many needs. And so sometimes I feel like I'm kind of chasing my tail, and which need am I going after next, and waiting for, that guidance to show me where to go. And this is where my guidance has led me right now. So I'm interested to see, what value I could bring to the Native American church. Most recently too, in February of this year, I decided I've retired my nursing license now because of the Ehlers-Danlos. I will not be working as a bedside nurse ever again. I retired it in good standing and decided to expand my natural medicine repertoire. So I am currently enrolled in Rosemary Gladstar's herbalism certification course. So I'll be a certified herbalist by the end of this year. And it's been so much fun. You should see my greenhouse. It's full of medicinal herbs now that I want to plant and try, and getting a lot of hands-on practice in that course as well. So I think that's where we are in real time. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm just really excited to come and visit you and see your greenhouse. And are you using your medicine to treat your husband's pain?
Yes. So he fell off a roof and he broke his leg in 3 places. Such a bad break that he'll be no weight bearing, unable to walk now until probably June, it's looking like. He fell off a roof, so it was a spiral break, which are the hardest ones to heal. He ended up having a rod placed the full length of his lower leg. And he was off of the opioids. He came home on 3 opioids from the hospital. Of course, we had to stop his cannabis use while he was in there, which he also uses it for chronic pain, being in construction. He's constantly injured. But within 2 weeks of coming home from the hospital, he was down to 1 of the 3 medications and only at night. And as of right now, he's completely off all of them. And inhaled THC was the only thing he was really able to safely use at first to get off the first 2. But now he's on oral and, tinctures for pain. And they have completely, he was taking Dilaudid, Tramadol, and oxycodone, and he's off all 3 of them. So it really is powerful. He's also very determined. He does not want to be on the opioids any longer than needed, obviously. He has me chirping in his ear about that too. So yes, he's doing very well. Pain is managed. It is a powerful tool.
So
Janna,
I really invite any of my people who work with marijuana to really learn the difference between when they're using recreational marijuana and when they're using medical marijuana, and really connecting to the spirit, because the spirit is so different. So I just made a bold statement, so I'd love to hear what Lynn and you have to say about that.
let's hear what
Because
Janna has
I
to say
have
about it.
so many people that start out on marijuana smoking and then go to meth and destroy their life.
So Janna, I would like you to talk about that, Janna, but I don't think you were clear about you having developed the core.
Can somebody repeat what he said?
Yeah, so Janna, can you talk about developing the law in Oregon that allows nurses to consult on cannabis, and then answer the question that Linda asked as well? Did you hear that, Janna?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to go further into both. There's just so much, I'm trying to really kind of keep it targeted to this conversation. So in 2019, the Oregon State Board of Nursing decided that nurses were no longer allowed to educate cannabis patients. A year or so later, my attorney reached out to me and said, hey, this is an injustice. It's actually, it's in breach of Conant versus Walters, which is a 2004 decision, federal, I believe, that protects medical professionals' right to free speech with their patients. It's actually being infringed upon in California right now with some of their regulations regarding COVID education and COVID vaccine education. So I think it's going to be coming up again shortly. But basically, my attorney petitioned the Oregon State Board of Nursing, and they were forced to retract what we call their cannabis nurse gag order. And then we had SB 3369 pass shortly thereafter, which specifically allows nurses to educate cannabis patients. So that has been repealed. Like I said, my decision to retire my nursing license was more around the fact that I wasn't going to be doing bedside nursing anymore because I am at heightened risk of both physical and immune injury. So hospital work is no longer something I will do, although I did work in a hospital for several years after graduating nursing school. So I do have that background.
And you helped create legislation, in fact, that outlines giving nurses that authority, and you've developed a curriculum course to train the nurses how to implement that law.
Janna, can you please repeat what he's saying?
Yes, he's asking me to go a little further into depth about my roles in education and as a legislative activist. And so there was the SB 3369, which in Oregon specifically protects nurses' education of cannabis patients, which it really comes down to an ethical question. Medical ethics, nurses take the Nightingale Oath, physicians take the Hippocratic Oath. It requires that we are providing our patients with informed consent. It requires, means they have to receive education on all of the possible options for their medicine. In Oregon, we've had medical cannabis legal for 25 years. But as of right now, patients are not receiving informed consent. It allows for patient autonomy, which it requires that we provide patient autonomy, meaning the patient has the right to choose their medicine. That is also not happening. There's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of persecution still of those that choose cannabis as their medicine, even in Oregon. It's so ridiculous. And so I'm fighting legislatively on those bases. This year we have 2023 session. We've introduced Ryan's Law in Oregon, which is a copycat of California Ryan's Law SB 311 that passed in 2021. And it's actually going to protect patients' right to access their cannabis while in a medical setting of any kind. So that's really going to be a way that we can help enforce medical ethics for these patients. And also the Oregon Cannabis Healthcare Act, which I don't think is, because that one has a price tag attached, is going to take a little longer, but it will mandate that all medical professionals in Oregon are at least minimally educated. We're talking about a 3-hour continuing education course, so that they at least understand enough to know when a patient should be referred to a specialist in cannabis for education and guidance and assessment of risk factors and pharmaceutical interactions that are possible. These basic medical processes that are completely missing in the medical cannabis industry in Oregon and elsewhere, pretty much everywhere else.
And to be clear, you helped write those courses, and you helped write those courses, correct? Go ahead and repeat my statement and then answer.
Yes, I did write. I've written several courses. I have a 3-hour accredited course through Cannabis Nurses Network. That's a basic theory, cannabinoid science theory course for nurses. I have another 3-hour course that's practical application. So how to assess patients, what's important, condition-specific considerations, pharmaceutical interactions, how that could make or break somebody's response to cannabis. Those are all included. My college course, I got to choose the textbooks, and I wrote it from scratch with my mentor being the dean of the college that kind of helped me pull together the DOE requirements and got it all submitted for me. I also delivered accredited content in 2018 at the Oregon Holistic Nurses Association conference on cannabinoid science for nurses, and they have invited me to return this year to their conference in October to speak about legislative updates and things like that. So I've done quite a lot of educating. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily my goal to end up here, but here I am. So, I'm also very interested in research and product development, and there's, Unity formulas, which I helped develop. These are CBD hemp products, so not intoxicating, legal in all 50 states without any paperwork. And really, just my experience working with patients, you learn, and as a grower, you learn that not all cultivars or strains are appropriate or optimal for every single use. So it's about teaching patients which products are supported for alleviating pain, if pain management is their number one goal. These are the products that the research supports. These are the terpene, so I guess I should regress a little bit. The cannabis flower contains more than 500 individual compounds. And when you mix and match those, especially the cannabinoids, which is over 150 of those that it produces that we know of, over 200 terpenes, you can think of the terpenes kind of like the essential oils. And the terpenes, just like essential oils, have medicinal uses that are supported by research in their own right. So you find when you mix and match the right combination of things, you can get a formula that is going to help that patient reach their goal more quickly. Now, the caveat is that there is a lot of individual response. Not the same formulation is not going to work for every single person. So there does need to be some flexibility, and there may still be some trial and error, but we can really minimize that by making sure our patients are well informed and well educated and understand not only what product is supported for their condition or their symptom goal, but also, what pharmaceuticals might interact with it. We had a 2020 case, meloxicam case study, where a patient combined, it was a human altered, for lack of a better term, I call them bastardized forms of cannabis, because they've stripped them way down to one compound, and then they anodize them, or they make them liposomal and encapsulate them in fat. They're increasing the bioavailability. And in this case, this is the only case where we have a patient whose death was implicated to a combination of a liposomal, increased bioavailable CBD, and meloxicam, which they cross in the same metabolic pathway in the liver, the CYP450 pathway. It's the same pathway that the doctors will say, don't eat grapefruit if you're taking this medication. So it's a pretty common pathway. So it just really speaks to the importance of making sure patients are well informed and educated before they decide to use cannabis as medicine. So that's really something that's driven me, is patient safety, patient efficacy, helping them optimize their outcomes of cannabis therapy through a well-informed and educated approach that's supported by medical professionals that really understand this, which were kind of difficult to find, unfortunately, even in Oregon. And one of the things that has happened as a result of this is that because there are a few compounds of the 500 in cannabis that can be intoxicating. Of course, THC is notorious for this. And Linda, I don't call it marijuana because that is a term that it's theorized that it has some racist undertones to it. From a botanical perspective, because I teach about the botany of the plant in my course, the botany sees cannabis sativa L. It calls cannabis sativa L. It refers to that for every type of cannabis, whether it's hemp or it's marijuana. Those are human terms that we've placed on it without a lot of logic on the parameters, like who came up with 0.3% THC. I don't know. It's 5% THC in North Dakota. It's 3% THC in Texas. Like, there's no scientific basis for these limitations, except that people seem to be fearful of the euphoria, although, there's plenty of pharmaceuticals that can cause similar issues and addiction issues, which cannabis is not. It's been debunked as being physically addictive. And in fact, they say that caffeine and sugar are more physically addictive than cannabis, even THC cannabis. The caveat being that it can be psychologically addictive to somebody that is prone or seeking a mental escape. So that's where I can see it becoming problematic. And so patients might show up to their physician who knows nothing about cannabis and say, I'm using this and, my function has gone way down. I'm not driving anymore. I'm not getting out. I'm just laying on my couch all day. Yes, that's problematic. Does that constitute an addiction disorder label like they're placing on these patients, which is cannabis use disorder? Absolutely not. I say at that point, they should be referring the patient to somebody that understands cannabis, that can help them tweak their regimen. Say, hey, let's get you on the non-intoxicating compounds during the day so you can be optimally functional. Let's make sure that if you need intoxicating compounds, you're taking them at night, you're sleeping through the intoxication. As long as we don't bypass your tolerance, you shouldn't have any next morning grogginess or any after effects of it whatsoever. That is optimal medical use. Recreational use, because there is so few resources for patients, it's easy for them to fall into this, oh, they're misusing or they're only using recreationally. I don't see that as the fault of the patient. I don't think patients, most are coming to this saying, I want to abuse it. I want it to be a gateway to something else that will help me escape. That's not the case. I think most patients are self-medicating. And Dr. David Allen has a beautiful, and I can send this to you guys. He has a beautiful, very quick little interview he did that talks about how even recreational cannabis users are receiving benefits, physical benefits from that use. And he cited a retrospective study that was done on one group that had been smoking cannabis for 20 years, another group that had not. And in those that were just smoking cannabis, they weren't thinking medical benefits. They were thinking, hey, this makes me feel good. It's healthier than alcohol. I can still have fun and relax and be social at my outings and not have the hangover the next morning. That's the reason I switched over in my early 20s. But he, in this group of patients that had been smoking cannabis for 20 years, they had an 80% less incidence of diabetes. And those users were not thinking medical use, but they still received medical benefits from it. So it's just the way this plant works. And to understand that, you really need to kind of understand the science that has been emerging since 1992 on the endocannabinoid system. We have this system in our body that is sort of like the motherboard. Its job is to promote homeostasis or optimal health balance in every other system of the body. It's linked with the neurological system. It's linked with the skeletal system. It's linked with the immune system. It's linked with the gastrointestinal system. It's linked with the hormone system. It's linked with everything else. And so when you consider that, and the fact that this endocannabinoid system produces cannabinoids, we produce cannabinoids in our body. The precursors being omega-3s and 6 fatty acids, which of course are often deficient. So if we can't produce enough of these, and by the way, we have one called anandamide, ananda being the Sanskrit for bliss. Anandamide is synonymous and works the exact same way as THC from the plant as a phytocannabinoid. 2-AG is another one that we make. 2-arachidonyl glycerol is the name of it. And it works the same way as CBD from the plant. So when our bodies can't produce enough of these endocannabinoids, which many reasons for it, could be that we don't have enough omegas in our diet, could be that we have a genetic predisposition or a genetic mutation that causes us to be unable to produce enough endocannabinoids. It's this condition now that Dr. Ethan Russo has termed endocannabinoid deficiency. It means our bodies can't produce enough. When our bodies can't produce enough endocannabinoids to remain in balance, we end up in chronic illness states. And he actually links just about every chronic illness with endocannabinoid deficiency. Autoimmune is one, autism is another, Alzheimer's is another, chronic pain, certain chronic pain symptoms like fibromyalgia is another. So it's actually a deficiency in our body that the phytocannabinoids from the plant can seamlessly fill in and start promoting that balance. Now, from a bigger picture view, as a nurse, if you understand that the cause of all disease is underlying imbalances. So this explains, some of the misconceptions among medical professionals. Of course, they're scared to death of the Schedule I placement, which we actually had a federal DEA judge agree with us that cannabis met 0 of the criteria for Schedule I placement in 1988. We had a judge agree with us. The 3 criteria being, number 1, it must be addictive, physically addictive, not. Number 2, it must be harmful. It's not. It's only harmful when mixed with the wrong pharmaceuticals, which is completely preventable. Number 3 is that it must have no medicinal use. And on the other hand, our federal government, in its great hypocrisy, has multiple patents for cannabis for its medical benefits. The most notorious being 6630507. That was the first one that came out. As far as a harm reduction tool, it has an unsurpassed safety profile. So as a medical professional, that ethics of helping patients understand all of their options and helping them weigh the risk versus benefit, opioids, which are killing patients every 18 minutes, and of horrible side effects. One of my patients on opioids, her gut had stopped working. She had tubes to eliminate. She was either fast asleep or awake and screaming pain and nothing in between. That's just one example of a patient I actually worked with in the hospital. So when you consider that cannabis, the side effects of cannabis are euphoria, homeostasis or balance, logically, all politics and stigma aside, cannabis should be the first intervention for patients with chronic pain, especially where mainstream medicine does not have safe and effective options for them ethically. Now, I was a critical care cardiac nurse, so I'm not saying you have a heart attack, go take your cannabis. That's not the case. You have a heart attack, go to the hospital. There is a place for acute care medicine and the pharmaceuticals. But when it's chronic illness and all we have are steroid anti-inflammatories or immunosuppressants, like they tried to put me on for the lupus, those are horrific side effects. So we've lost this objective approach as in regards to cannabis, because largely due to stigma, and it is all profit driven. Cannabis is the #1 competitor to pharmaceutical profits. And so that's a big part of the reason, there's big profit, political entanglement. It's a big part of the reason why we still have limited access and we still have, we're basically devoid of knowledgeable medical professionals to help these patients. So.
Linda, are you complete? Was your question answered completely then? Did you have more feedback for Janna? Now we can't hear you.
Oh, you're on mute, Linda. Sorry.
I'm going to talk to you privately when I come, but I really would like you to present. This is so different than anything I've ever heard. So I would really love to get you on the calendar. So if you could tell, our meetings are always on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. So if you could look at your schedule and let me know when you could present. I just think it's so important because it takes it all to another level, and I want my people really educated. So whether we all go in and do the 3-month course or what, but Lynn, because you are an expert, I would love for you to ask questions and.
Okay, let me say this. Janna, the meetings are right now set for every other Tuesday, and I'll work with you on those times. They last for 90 minutes. And I'll work with you on a time that will be suitable for you. With your permission, we could even make this recording available, but I would much rather have you, and I'm sure Linda wants you to present, so that those that are there can ask questions and integrate and just really get involved in this.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have Lynn ask some questions. I'm hoping he does. I just want to say this. We have 2 other guys here who didn't show up today that are key players on this committee. One guy has a PhD in biological science. He studied DNA. And he understands molecularly what's going on, but doesn't understand the practical applications that you have. I wish he were here to ask you questions. He's not.
And
that'll happen another time.
Janna, he happens to be my son, and we'll do a Zoom call when I'm at your place. So Lynn, I really would love to hear from you. And Sean, if you have any questions,
Sean has to
please.
leave. Sean has to leave, so maybe it'd be good for him to jump in first.
Go first.
I really don't have any questions. It's a wealth of information, and I'm really glad that we have that kind of resource as part of this group. It's Janna, that I was blown away. It's very important what you have. There's a doctor that I became acquainted with 10 years ago, William Courtney in California, who has done amazing things over the last 25 years with cannabis as far as a medical approach, and has gotten in a lot of trouble for doing it. But he says, I'm not going to stop doing it because, it helps people. So he's another resource that has been there. I don't know if he's available now, but I think there's just a lot that is not understood, and I'm just really glad to have you part of this, and I will stay on for a few more minutes, but I do have to leave pretty quick. Thanks.
Good. So Lynn, I'm hoping you ask some really technical questions and see if you can stump the expert.
Uh-oh. Bring it. I'm good.
Well, I hope that my contribution is more of an ally. I'm not tearing apart. I agree, Janna. Thank you for sharing. First off, and I know that you everything that you shared are things that I all agree with. I think one thing that we can also agree to is that one of the largest challenges, and this kind of relates back to Linda's question, is that one of the biggest challenges that I've seen evolve over time in the cannabis industry and our use of medicine is that there has been very little guidance provided in terms of ethical and responsible use when it comes, especially when it comes to dosage. Dosage has been primarily one of the areas that has been avoided or just misunderstood. And I think that's part of the problem that you run into with patients, is that they don't know how to often use the medicine in an appropriate way for the benefit that they're seeking. And so oftentimes you have them over consumption, and which can lead to abuse. So I think that part of my interest is in working with this team to hopefully design or provide some additional support in terms of a organizational guidance on how people are recommending use, almost as the same way they would as a pharmacist, for different physiological or mental or emotional benefits. And I'm sure that, would you agree that there are different dosages that are more appropriate for different uses and applications?
Yeah, dosing, it gets tricky. There's a lot to that. So that was kind of a loaded statement or question. Dosage depends on the formulation. Is it an isolate? Is it an increased bioavailability like a nanodized or a liposomal? Or is it a whole plant concentrate that's reserving the synergy of the whole plant flower? All of those doses vary. And what the research says is, of course, I don't know where you stand on this, but I'm learning this in herbalism school as well, that it appears that trusting in nature and all of the compounds it puts into a medicinal herb tends to work better at lower dosing versus the isolate that somebody, stripped away to patent and be able to keep all of the profit from it, like we see with pharmaceuticals doing from herbs, right?
Right.
The research reflects that with cannabis, for seizures specifically, that whole plant preparations seem to work just as well or better at 25 to 30% of the dose of an isolate. And that was in reference to Epidiolex, which is the GW pharmaceutical CBD isolate for seizures. Mm-hmm. So, we see a lot of additional benefits as well. There, just like there's plants that that are diuretics and they help to reduce your fluids, right? Well, when you take Lasix, which is the pharmaceutical version of that, you have to supplement that patient with potassium because it can just dump their potassium and they start having heart problems from it. Well, the herb world, diuretics, that plant has potassium in there as well. So that's sort of what we see with cannabis as well. It's not just the cannabinoids and the terpenes, it's bioflavonoids, it's antioxidants, it's essential fatty acids, it's chlorophyll. It's all these synergistic compounds that are improving how it works in the body. Mm-hmm. So, but as far as dosing too, like we have a lot of dosing parameters that have been derived from the research, but most of the research is on isolate. And I encourage patients to seek whole plant preparations. And so as a nurse, what is considered best practice overall is to guide patients to a product, have them start low dose. And I usually, refer to the manufacturer recommendation on the bottle and say, start there. Increase slowly over time. I furnish my patients a patient handbook with a journalet so they can say, I took this much. This was the symptom I was after. This is how it worked. Next time, if you need more, take twice as much and, just in quarter mil increments. So, it's 5 milligram or so increments in this formula. And stop where you feel good. Make that your daily dose. And I normally also how you take it makes a difference. Are you taking it sublingually? Are you taking it as an inhalant? Are you swallowing it? So it's subject to liver metabolism and first pass, and that changes the length of time it takes to kick in, the length of time it's going to work, the duration is going to change. In the event of swallowing it, it actually alters the molecules themselves and makes them stronger. So all of those also, come into consideration when we're talking dosage. So for an individualized approach, which I consider best, because there's also individual responses in people. You can have two people with a 5 out of 10 pain level. One may need 20 milligrams, the other one may need 100 milligrams. So start low, increase slowly, stop where you feel good. I usually recommend starting with sublinguals because they absorb directly to the bloodstream very quickly, kicks in about 15 minutes. And then once they have a handle on how much they need, drop it in an empty capsule and swallow it. And then that extends the duration from 2 to 3 hours, sublingual or inhaled, to 6 to 8 hours. So they're not having to take drops every 2 to 3 hours that way. It kind of, gives them a longer duration, also saves them money on product that way. So
Right.
that's my general dosing advice on cannabis.
Right. I guess part of where I'm interested in how this can benefit us moving forward is to begin developing a repository of this, we'll say, the clinical information to help inform how people are guided through the process of using whole plant medicine. I'm 100% with you in terms of holistic medicine as a whole, as a rule, and looking at the plant. Obviously, as you know, different parts of different plants to have different impacts as well, and those are all important factors. And I think part of what we're trying to ultimately arrive at is a better approach to being able to facilitate the healing that we know is possible with these natural plant medicines, for a variety of conditions and uses. And the more that we can self-regulate and the more that we can self-inform in terms of responsible use, one, we can avoid a lot of the misuse and abuse that's happening, but we can also help people to avoid the common challenges and mistakes that are made in using these medicines as well. For example, we know that there are certain types of conditions that can arise when cannabis and other things are mixed with other medicines, and what I consider medicine is even caffeine is a medicine. And when people are, for example, are over consuming caffeine or stimulants with cannabis over certain periods of time, it can induce psychosis. It can induce, episodes of psychosis that are a part of serotonin. It's called the serotonin syndrome, which is where the body has a difficulty breaking down the cannabis any further within the body, and it can create all kinds of problems because it creates a psychological confusion of how to be able to manage that situation in a healthy, rational way than they normally would. So I think part of where I'm hoping that we can work together is developing those guidelines and that information to help practitioners to also inform their patients, we'll call them, or the people that they are counseling with these medicines, and how to use them best. And I have a clinical experience in some of this and a lot of personal experience as well. And my personal opinion about it is that from the medical benefits that if you're seeking certain medical benefits, that most consumers are significantly over consuming in the amount of dosage that they need to be able to achieve those benefits, and not realizing that they're pushing themselves beyond the medical effective recommended dose, we'll call it. And but that there are many other beautiful ways of being able to use the medicine. I've even used it in treating trauma and PTSD, and in, we'll say, central nervous system regulation, and even being able to cross over. And I think you've probably seen a lot more of this use as well, as we'll call it the healthy industry use, where there are a lot of people in the fitness and yoga space and meditation space using these medicines to be able to enhance that experience and to be able to work with the body better in new ways. And I think that those all need to be addressed and understood so that they can be shared. And again, informed consent is a big part of being able to help people guide through this process. But part of it is also being able to provide realistic, informed information that comes from the clinical side as well as the spiritual side. And if we can balance a lot of those and work as a team to be able to come up with those guidelines, there are a lot of issues that I think that we can avoid entirely, even when it comes to government regulation and
How
control.
big the plate is, how much gets stacked on it.
I know, which one do you think you want?
Oh, sorry.
No, I
Were
think
you saying
Steve,
something, Stephen?
I think Steve thinks he's muted. There he is. He's
I
Oh,
muted.
thought
okay.
I was muted. I apologize.
It's
You're
okay.
okay. I just didn't want to miss you if you had something you wanted to add. Anyways, the interest is in being able to bridge many of these gaps so that frankly, we get to a point where the legalities of this are no longer an issue. I think you're absolutely right that part of the reason why this has ever been an issue, and it's the same thing for all of the supplement industry, all of the natural and plant medicine industry, is that it's in direct contradiction to the pharmaceuticals and to the medical industry. And those guys are all profit over patient. And part of us being able to draw a line in the sand is establishing our own guidelines and our own medically validated evidence for being able to establish those guidelines and self-regulate, especially within organizations like NAC.
Okay, I would like to, I do have an immediate response because we're approaching our time to leave.
Yeah, I
Sean?
do. I do.
Oh, go ahead, Jan.
Oh, no, go ahead, Sean. I know you've got to go.
It's just, it's a paradigm shift that I'm going through right now that I think, and I'm speaking directly to, the concept of Native American church. Okay, our primary sacrament in spiritual process is peyote with Native American church, and that's nationwide to a great extent through all the tribal NACs and through Aklava and all that. However, in all tribes and in all settings, the spiritual aspect is not the only aspect of a medicine person. A medicine person is also dealing with whole herb, whole plant medicine for the people of their responsibility. It's not all ceremonial. It's not all spiritual. Well, I mean, all things are spiritual to me, but you know what I'm saying? That's not primarily what it's always about, in that a medicine person should be able to figure out how to help someone who has a broken finger, or how to help someone who's suffering from depression, and the spiritual aspect isn't even available to them yet because they can't focus enough on it to get there. And that's a wild, crazy analogy. But what I'm saying is, I think that there's more avenues here that we can discuss from the Native American church aspect of medicine people doing more than just doing ceremonies and spiritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I gotta go, but I wanted to throw that out there before I left.
Okay, Sean, before you go, I just want to put this a record and have you hear it. Janna actually looked at my DNA profile from 23andMe, and there are better DNA profiles than that. She put it together with my blood work from my doctor. I had a year of blood work I sent her. She looked at my DNA, my blood work, and then came up with supplemental recommendations in terms of non-cannabinoid and cannabinoid supplements that would help me on my thing. I want you to hear that. I want this to be part of this record.
Cool. Yeah, I just had my blood test results given to me by my doctor today.
Beautiful.
So, and I don't know how to read all of it, but I know quite a bit of it. So
yeah.
Yeah, and now, Steve, I'm learning how to replace the supplements, which of course are often isolates, with herbal remedies that have those same benefits. So that's part of my goal with taking the herbalism course, is being able to make that transition as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Sean.
you, Sean.
Thank you,
Glad you
Sean.
made it, Sean. Congrats.
Yeah, so Lynn, I made a bunch of little notes as you were
Mhm.
talking. I'm going to kind of run through this. We talked about dosage. Linda mentioned intention. I think intention of usage is very important. Most people, because we lack resources to help educate, don't even understand that there's a medical approach versus a eeny, meeny, miny, mo, take what feels good approach, right? And that can lead to abuse. It can lead to psychological addiction. It can lead to escapism. It can lead to people not facing their problems. It can lead to impairment of function. And I have the criteria for cannabis use disorder as a DSM, and I'm happy to share that with the group. One of the criteria on there is impaired function. And most most of the criteria, I believe, can be remedied just by having that patient be assessed by a knowledgeable medical professional and guided to more appropriate use. Because realistically, when our intent and our approach is a medical approach, our goal is optimizing quality of life and function. And that is commonly what we see when we go through this medical assessment and help patients understand what is optimal, including risk factors and side effects, things like that. You mentioned the psychosis, and so there's very specific risk factors for psychosis with THC. If someone has a family history of schizophrenia or they have a genetic mutation called AKT1, it can change how their body processes dopamine, and THC increases dopamine too. So that combination is a no-no. AKT1 is the only research-supported contraindication to THC use. It's pretty easy to avoid through assessment of family history, assessment of schizophrenia risk, even genetic assessment to look for that AKT1 mutation. You mentioned the serotonin syndrome, and that's, to me, is sort of a separate issue. The serotonin syndrome and psychosis linked with increased serotonin is more commonly a risk for CBD, which, of course, CBD is available over the counter. Anybody in any state can go buy it at a gas station, right? And most people don't understand that that's the one that's most prone to interact with pharmaceuticals. Where we see the serotonin syndrome is when CBD is combined with SSRIs, which are already increasing serotonin, right? Those are the antidepressant medications, or even naturals like 5-HTP, which are the precursors to serotonin. Once again, very avoidable with a patient assessment by a knowledgeable professional and individualized guidance. Hey, if you're taking 5-HTP, maybe take your CBD 12 hours prior, which makes sense. Most people take the serotonin things at night. So that's where we see more of the serotonin syndrome risk. Let's see what else. Oh, and as far as you talked about, the political ramifications. So we've had so many attempts to deschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 at the federal level, and they all die in Congress. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who of course just announced he's running for president, he was quoted as saying that, and he's very big on anti-corruption and calling out pharmaceuticals on their harm for profits and things like that. So he's quoted as saying that every congressperson has 3 lobbyists from pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical contributions to Congress campaign funding is more than double that of the next leading industry, which is oil and gas. So this explains why all attempts to improve cannabis legalization at a federal level dies in Congress. And it explains why here we are 35 years since 1988 when we had a DEA judge say, yes, you've proven cannabis meets 0 of the 3 criteria for Schedule 1. It should be descheduled. Here we are still fighting that same fight 35 years later. What really drives me is the fact that this is not in the best interest of patients. Considering that cannabis provides really unique nutrients that are vital to human health, vital to homeostasis in the human body. It's actually theorized that without an endocannabinoid system, human life would not be possible. I actually am beginning to view this as a human rights issue, that access to the cannabis plant as a whole, as something you can grow, as something you can process at home, as something you can eat, unsurpassed safety profiles, should be a basic human right. And I forgot to mention, I did get a human rights consultant certification recently too, because I think there's some crossover there.
Janna, if I may, along that line, I 100% agree with you. And in fact, part of what I'm hoping to gear towards is really embracing, this is something that's talked about even within the Native American Church. I'm talking about the National Native American Church, which is that, yes, we're focused as, that peyote is a sacred sacrament, but the very prominent belief that amongst all church members is that all plants are purposefully created by the Great Spirit and by the Creator for our use. And it comes down to being able to find and understand what is that appropriate use. And like you said, ultimately to protect our health, liberty, our medical freedom to be able to make that decision of what's right for us and in our own situation. And the only way to be able to ultimately achieve that is to draw a line in the sand. And frankly, we can use our position within the Native American Church to be able to establish a hard line that should not be crossed, but also to begin self-regulating and self-providing those, we'll call them the SOPs, the standard operating procedures of how we're guiding the organization, people that are providing these medicines, so that they are following the same best practices. And so that even from, frankly, and this is something Linda and everybody, we should take in serious consideration, especially after some of the very serious negative outcomes that can be the result of not following those guidelines, is death or serious harm or injury, and the risk associated with that, and the risk, frankly, of the organization being able to survive that type of a blow by not following those guidelines, because those have happened in the past, and those are things that need to be addressed looking forward, and coming up with new ways of being able to do that responsibly. And I love the opportunity to work together to ultimately arrive at where that is. But my desire personally is to protect all natural plant medicines, because I definitely see that we are being infringed upon by the pharmaceutical industries, and it has been all for profit. And we need to be able to draw a line and say, this is a part of our belief system and something that we will protect no matter what. And I love being able to have the science and the clinical research and all of that standing behind us to be able to demonstrate it. But we have to also be following that same information. Otherwise, we're just, telling the same story of like a whole bunch of people that just like to misuse a medicine. That's not the case. And so thank you for your insight on this. And I'm sure Steve's going to probably try to push us off here, but thank you very much. And I appreciate being able to have the conversation.
Thanks,
Janna, I want to invite many, many people to your presentation. So I want to include ONAC and I'm going to put it out to the people that I work with, so we don't waste your time. Having you do it over and over. Like I said, when I go to Washington, my son and I will get a hold of you, and I'll go about setting up a meeting. So it's going to be out there a little while, because I have to talk to Linda Mooney and James and Longbuck, and he teaches a course on it. I don't know how educated he really is, but for me, and they may refuse, I don't think they will, but they may. But my people are going to have this education. So Gent and I need to talk with you to figure out exactly how we want to do that. And I apologize, my daughter come to move her van in the middle of this, so I missed a lot, but I've heard enough to know how educated you are. And like I said, Billy is in so much pain with 5 teeth, and she has a bad heart, and they won't give her any pain medication, and she's just freaking out, but I can't get her to call me back to tell her about this. So I'm going to call her again when we get off. But again, like Lynn said, we want to do everything in a good way. And you've totally opened my eyes and changed my opinion, because I didn't have this kind of knowledge. I did not know how to teach people how to use it, this particular medicine. And so we all, because like I said, my experience is at 14, 13 or 14, the young kids start smoking marijuana, and then they go to meth. And then I have either people in prison or dead. And so I've just steered everybody away from it. And so I just feel like this is critical.
It is.
So
It is.
it's
Yeah,
6 minutes after the hour. We want to respect your time, Janna. Jen, the PhD in biogenetic stuff, is here. I'm going to have him listen to this recording so he has a good background. I want to respect your time because we told you an hour, we're 6 minutes over.
I'm doing okay. My daughter and grandson just showed up, but they're going to be here this evening, so I'm good. Just quickly, I know, Lynn, you talked about resources, and I just want to get it on record that there are many resources that are already created and available. There's a patient self-questionnaire that helps patients understand when they should seek medical guidance of their cannabis therapy for serious medical use. Once again, it's about that intention. It's about, you know, the medical mind and the medical approach and the medical, you know, having that informed approach, that individualized approach. So, and Linda, you mentioned a good point with adolescence and childhood use of cannabis. We want to make darn sure that the benefits outweigh the risk factors, because that is, you know, there can be some risks, especially of THC use in childhood and adolescence. Oftentimes, you know, the child is in a situation where they're being harmed by pharmaceuticals, or a deadly disease like cancer, or something like autism where they're self-injurious and the medications, the mental health medications, have horrific side effects. So that's always something we're kind of weighing. And of course, Linda, I've, you know, referred your friend to the free nurse guidance, which is a great place for people to start for CBD, which is non-intoxicating, so shouldn't bring about any more of her addiction issues. You know, we've got a lot of resources in place already, and one group I'm working with is linked with the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, and they're trying to collaborate and get some CBD donated in exchange for research data from those that try it, specific to blood sugar levels and diabetes and obesity, to see if there's a formulation we can pull together to help with that. So, you know, and then spiritual aspects, I mean, it can bring people back from that edge of crisis and help them seek healthier behaviors all around, all levels of health, spiritual, mental, physical, everything in between. And there's a lot of people that speak. I did an interview on cannabis and spirituality and kind of told my story in more depth of how it helped that way. So it is definitely, it can provide spiritual healing for people as well. And it goes back to the spirits of these plants and making sure that we recognize them and that we're using them with the correct intention and using them respectfully, and not just, you know, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I'm going to take 100 milligrams of this because that's what the bed tender told me to do. We see a lot of
And
that.
that's exactly what I tell everyone. Your little spill right there is what I tell everyone about plant medicine. This is not a drug. This is medicine. There's a huge difference, and you have to become one with that spirit, and you have to listen to it.
Yep, that's
I
wisdom.
mean,
Every native tribe. It's funny, a cannabis nurse kindred of mine went to Peru to do ayahuasca with a native tribe there. And she was explaining to them that cannabis was against the law in the United States, and they were just dumbfounded. Dumbfounded at how we could criminalize a plant, and especially one with such a helpful spirit. So, you know, it really, it's very contradictory to our natural wisdom, I believe. But yeah, and I know, Jen, you've only been on a few minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or, you know, if you have concerns you'd like me to address. I can follow up an email too with some of these links and stuff. So
Yeah, I definitely looked at the time wrong.
oh, it happens.
Thought it was 5 o'clock my time, but I'll go back and watch you guys' recording.
Yeah, and I'm happy to deep dive with you on the molecular aspects of the plant. And I did talk a little bit about, you know, the compounds found in cannabis flower and how they influence the human body, and how they actually can replenish when we are deficient in vital nutrients known as endocannabinoids that we produce, that they can seamlessly be replaced by the phytocannabinoids that come from the cannabis flowers. So I wrote a college course on that, and I'm happy to deep dive with you on those aspects as well, and the genetic aspects, which I know Stephen has mentioned. So
Cool. I think it's time to go, you guys. The recording will be available. As soon as the recording is available, Janna, I'm going to send it to everybody that was invited to the call, and then they can watch it
Uh-oh, I think we lost you, Steve.
To communicate with you privately to resolve some things.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I thought maybe it was me.
No,
No, it's his.
Steve,
It's
we
his
cannot hear
audio.
you.
Hmm. Bye, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Bye,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Talk again soon. Reach out anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Jen.